So, I would like to talk briefly about so called wage inflation. I heard the term today on YouTube. Someone was analyzing the economy and what the Fed was going to do to help us all, and they discussed the idea of wage inflation. Well, I want to state that there is no such thing as wage inflation. Wage inflation implies that just by workers getting paid by companies alone can create inflation in the economy. And I'll add in with that the idea of an overheated economy from full employment. There's no such thing. Wage inflation cannot happen. It cannot happen without the central bank printing money. So, first of all, inflation cannot happen in general in a growing economy, or even a non growing economy, as long as the supply of goods and services does not fall. Then inflation cannot happen. There's a certain amount of money in the economy buying a certain amount of goods, and the average price per good cannot rise unless there's a decrease in the supply of goods and services or an increase in the quantity of money being spent for those goods and services. So if the supply stays the same or increases, and the money supply does not increase, then prices cannot go higher. It's mathematically impossible. Draw it out on a piece of paper or Excel. Put $100 of spending over 100 goods. The average cost per good is $1. Well, if you don't increase the numerator, the $100, then you can't get a higher price than an average of $1 per good. It's impossible. So it's money printing that creates inflation. That is the sole cause of inflation. And that comes only from the government's central bank. Yes, it is the government's. So similarly, people can't get paid more money, or workers can't get paid more money by companies unless there's more money in the economy, unless companies get more money. Now, it's true, the companies, if the government's printing money, banks are making new loans, and every new loan is new money, then companies could be getting new and additional money with which to pay workers, and that could be the channel by which prices rise. The new money goes first to companies, they pay workers, and that causes inflation. Yes, that can happen. But without that new money being printed, without those companies getting new and additional funds, the total amount paid to workers cannot increase. Yes, it can technically in some years if you spend less on capital or less on interest and profits and pay more to workers. Okay, fine. But there's a very strict limit. It can't go up year after year. I would argue it would probably never go up 2 years in a row, certainly not 10, and certainly not very much, maybe 1% tops. So you can't have price inflation if workers are not getting more money. There is a total amount of money available to pay workers. This brings up the old wage fund doctrine of classical economists, which is supposedly refuted. It's not. There is a certain amount of money in the economy. There is therefore a certain amount of money that businesses have in general, and there's therefore a certain amount of money they pay to capital, and there's a certain amount they pay in taxes. There's a certain amount they pay back to shareholders or the owners of capital or people who make loans to the company. And then there's a certain amount of money they have to pay labor. So economy-wide, There is only a certain amount of labor, a wage fund, as the classical economist said, with which to pay labor. Prove me wrong. It's an absolute fact. There's only so much money unless the money supply is expanded. So what's really happening is the central bank prints money. That causes inflation. And economists, I don't know if they just are naive. I don't know if they do it on purpose, probably both, depending on who they are. They pretend that inflation can occur from people getting paid, as though they can suddenly somehow, workers can just start getting paid more when there's not new and additional money. Can't happen. Similarly, there's no such thing as full employment inflation. If you have 9 out of 10 workers working, and then there are 10 out of 10 workers working, well, guess where they got the money? The new 1 of 10 workers had to get some of the money that the 9 of 10 workers were getting, because there's nowhere else to get the money if there's no new and additional money. So it's still the same amount of money being paid to workers. So in reality, what happens is, just so you know, when the government prints money, that raises revenues of companies. And revenues rise faster than costs because many costs are historical or delayed in rising because of things like cost of goods sold and depreciation. It takes a while for those historical costs to catch up. So when companies experience inflation and have increased revenues relative to costs, that increases their profits. So inflation gives companies much of their profits. That's why when there's inflation, as there was the last 5 years, you see leftists saying, oh, but look at these big profits. Their profits have increased. Well, not in real terms, and over the next 10-year period, they certainly won't. But nominally, short term, yes, the profits increase on the income statement, but it's the government giving them these fake profits. That is what reduces unemployment, because when companies have more money, when they have those additional profits, they can pay more out to workers. They have the profits, they can pay more. And that's why unemployment falls and employment rises during periods of inflation. But then guess what happens? Well, then the central bank stops printing money and revenues stall or even fall with a monetary contraction from bank loans going bad. That's what happens in a recession. And then historical costs catch up. And then lo and behold, companies have to lay off people because the new and improved profit situation they used to hire new people was false. It was temporary. The companies were fooled. And so the big hiring spree turns into a big layoff spree, and then unemployment rises again. So, and that's what gives you the Phillips curve effect, by the way. So, the source of inflation is the central bank. It's not from paying workers' wages per se. And there's no such thing as a full employment causing an overheated economy. An overheated economy means they printed too much money. That's what an overheated economy is. So the wage fund doctrine is true. There's no such thing as wage-driven inflation or full employment causing an overheated economy. That's the lesson for today. Thank you.